Hello, we have the wonderful Christine Marshall here today with us for this episode of CloudBites Conversation. Christine is a Salesforce MVP. She's been in the ecosystem for a number of years, and she's probably best known now for being the technical content director at Salesforce Ben, amongst many other things. So welcome to the show, Christine.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
No, thank you for coming. I'm really excited to just have a great chat today and share all of the cool experiences you've got, because you've got a lot of experience in many different areas, which I know we'll touch on as we go through. And I think when I started the show, one of the things I want to do was bring people in who are doing things that aren't just like technical. There's a lot of great podcasts out there that talk about the technical aspects and talk about just I'm building this app, which is very exciting and wonderful. But with yourself and the work you do at Ben, kind of more around content creation and education, I think it's going to be fantastic. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you got started in Salesforce? When did you first learn about this wonderful thing?
This life-changing phenomenon that is Salesforce. So I have an English literature degree, and after I completed my degree, I bounced around in different jobs because I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I ended up doing a lot of things like account management, project management, and sales support management. And I was working for a branch of JCB, the diggers.
Yeah.
And we had a really old CRM. And I said to my boss, I can't do what you need me to do using this. We need a better one. And he said, okay, that's fine. You have to find it and implement it. So myself and one of my colleagues, Salesforce was the obvious answer because JCB headquarters uses it. Mm-hmm. But myself and a colleague implemented it together. It was like a baptism of fire over 3 months. And I loved every second of it. But then I changed jobs. And for the next 2 years, I did other jobs where I kind of dabbled in Salesforce. So that was 2014. And it wasn't until 2016 that I got my first full-time Salesforce admin job, working for Capita IT Services.
Oh, cool. So that's a JCB branch then down where you were. So have you ever been to the JCB head office, just out of interest?
I have, yes, once.
There's a lovely little lake outside it to go for a walk around. It's not too far from my grandmother, and we used to take her dog walking around there. But I always wanted to have a go on one of the diggers, but they weren't really allowing you to. It's a real shame.
No, they never let me have a go either. They let me sit in one once, but not actually turn it on.
For anyone who's not in the UK at the moment, it's election season here at the moment. So I'm pretty sure that within the next few days, we'll have about 30 images of different candidates sitting on various diggers somewhere pretending that they were doing some actual work for a change. But cool. So you got your first job at Capita, and was that an internal admin or was that as a consultant?
Yeah, that was as an internal admin. So I am entirely self-taught, and this was sort of before Trailhead really came about as well. And I was kind of learning on the go. And the Capita job was a bit of an accident. I think there was a miscommunication or maybe an outright lie between Capita and the recruiter, because I got this call from a recruiter asking me if I'd be interested, and I was really clear about the fact that I did not have any certifications, didn't have my admin cert. And what I didn't know was that Capita had specified that the candidate must have the admin certification. So I went to work for them as their internal admin. And about a year later, I actually finally went and got my admin cert. And I came back to the office and I was like, oh, look, I got my cert, only to be met by really surprised faces because they thought the whole time that I was certified.
Oh, wow. That must have been an interesting sort of like revelation. Although I think it's good and shows once again that I've always said certifications they're a validation and important, but I think that they're often overplayed in the ecosystem. I don't know about your thoughts. Like, important but not essential, perhaps.
I would agree. I don't think certifications can take the place of hands-on experience. And what I find with Salesforce is a lot of it is actually around requirements gathering, understanding different businesses, being able to communicate with stakeholders. All of that, I think, is even more important than the technical build itself. What I would say from my experience is that it was really great to get those certifications because there were things I wasn't using that I didn't know about. So we didn't use leads, for example, and I didn't know about forecasting. And certifications teach you best practices that you might otherwise not be aware of. So I do think they are really valuable.
Yeah, no, they definitely is a. I mean, it's really interesting talking about the value of certifications because with with my used to run a consultancy hat on, very, very important because Salesforce like tiers you as a partner on them. And there was a period of time where like you weren't going to get an AE give you a Service Cloud project unless you had someone with the Service Cloud cert, even though that might not be the person actually doing the project. Like you needed a badge to say you could do it. And then, as an ISV, I think that there's use in them to make sure you know, as you say, more about features and functionality and what's going on in there. I think as an internal user and admin, I think they're really, really useful for that bit you've just mentioned there of like realizing what you don't know. Yeah. I didn't take my admin exam until after I'd passed. So this is again sort of showing age a little bit, but I was trying to become a CTA under the old system before they had the pyramid, and there used to be one test you took for it. So it was a self assessment, then a test, and then you had the review board. And I didn't take my admin exam until after I'd taken and passed the CTA acceptance, like the exam before the review board. And I remember as another funny story when I was when my wife, or my now wife, was first starting to learn Salesforce. She came home one day and was just sort of spitballing an idea for a project with me and said, well, we need to do this thing we need to like manage quotes. Now, I have still to this day never implemented Sales Cloud fully anywhere.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for about 14 years now, and and I actually said to her, what we probably want to do is do like a custom quote object. At which point she just looked at me and was like, you do know there's quotes in Salesforce? I was like, really? Yeah. So everyone I think can learn something. I think that definitely doing those certs is really important to kind of show you what's out there that they're missing, because there's too many standard objects now as well to make it viable for you to actually know them all.
Well, did you know that there's over 600 standard objects?
I did not. There you go. That's and Christine's going to list them all here for us.
I only know that because I'm slightly obsessed with dynamic forms, or just all of the dynamic stuff they keep bringing out, dynamic related lists, dynamic actions. And I've been harping on for years since they first launched dynamic forms, where it was only for custom objects. And everyone else was like, this is rubbish. Paying for custom objects, it's useless. And I was like, no, wait, one day it will be really good. And we're finally there. So they now support Lightning Web Components, standard objects, and it turns out there's over 600 of them.
600. So what I mean, that I remember again, way back in the day, that like the little the key prefixes for the objects. So like 001's account, 003's contact, 005 is user, which is again very sad that I can remember some of those. User or profile, one of the two. And I'm sure someone will correct me in a comment. But if there's 600 of them now, like what are all their key prefixes? That's my biggest question. Although I suppose, is that standard objects as in including sort of the weird and wonderful extension packages that might have their own? Because like if you install a manage package, the keys aren't fixed for that.
No, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess if you think about it across all the different clouds, I can start to see how you can get to that number of objects.
Yeah. I'd give anything for them just to have like standard marketing cloud objects, let alone 3 standard marketing cloud objects would be nice, just to email and sort of send and things like that. But yeah, that's 600. There you go. That's today's fun fact and thing that we've learned is there are over 600 custom objects, standard objects even. So okay, so you've obviously gone away and after memorizing all of the list of standard objects, and getting your exam. So you were then as a solo admin for a while, yeah?
Yeah, so I've always been a solo admin, so accidental admin and solo admin. I think it's quite interesting what you were saying. Obviously, you often have your consultant hat on. Now, I've never been a consultant, and I sometimes wonder if that's why I come at things slightly differently, because I've only ever been a solo admin for an end user. So I only have that perspective. So I was a solo admin for 4 years, but at different companies. Which I really, really enjoyed. And I like that because it never gets dull because you have to wear every single hat going, you know. And I loved it. I love building, I love requirements gathering and getting a solution that works for people. And I also love sharing that knowledge. So that's how I kind of branched out into doing more of the content side of things.
Okay, yeah, because I think the last episode we had was an interview with Jodie Herbeck, and in that she spoke, who is the queen of rocking the admin world and evangelizing the admin role, and she was also an accidental admin, and I think it's interesting what you just said about like the different approaches you take on it, because I also think, and this is one of the things that Jodie and I were sort of discussing and hinting about as well, which would be good to get your view on, is one of the biggest positives of the Salesforce ecosystem I see is the variety of opinions and backgrounds. So you've come from a sales support background going into doing Salesforce. You will have far more hands-on experience of actually how sales works,
yes,
and how to configure it than someone who comes in from an IT background, for example.
Yeah.
And I think that's always been a real benefit of the platform and how people have come on board. I come from a 50-50 background where, although I don't have a computer science degree or anything like that, I was a programmer in other languages and things like that, and kind of fell into doing that because investment banking wasn't de rigueur at the time of the financial crash. And so this is why I'm doing this rather than living on an island somewhere with a big yacht. But what I'm getting at is that the fact we have such a diverse range of viewpoints, I think, is really good, and has kind of led to such a diverse range of resources out there as well. So Trailhead, for example, is one of those things that I personally find quite useful for like just a quick, oh, okay, that's how it works. But I personally can't use it to learn anything in detail. I don't think it goes into the level of depth that sometimes is needed. I'm a really boring person that likes a book or like an API document. Like that's because that's how I first learned to program, was a book that would literally sit there and go like, here's how you do a variable and a thing and a thing and a thing, and you go from there. Where Salesforce has grown so rapidly, though, have you found, and we'll hit on kind of some of your work for Salesforce Ben content round later, but have you found that there's been a change over time in the type of content requested and like the depth, not I'm going to say the depth of it, but do you know what I mean? Like the nature of it as you've got more kind of people of a traditional technical background?
It's a really interesting question, because I think as a whole, a lot of us, including Salesforce Ben, including Salesforce themselves, have moved away towards higher level content. There's lots of news, lots of career, lots of high level information about a feature. But I feel that we've moved way too far away from actual hand-holding tutorials and guides. And I say that as someone, my learning style is to read and then do. So I like something that literally will walk me through, step 1, log in. Step 2, go to Salesforce, like setup. So, and that's something that we're trying to bring back more at Salesforce Ben, are those more technical tutorials, because we just feel like there's this huge gap. And I do agree with you. I think Trailhead is great for a quick overview about a feature. It's, very well designed, but it's not particularly in depth. And again, as for my learning style, I love chunks and chunks of text on a page, which is not for everyone, but that's what I like. So for me, Trailhead doesn't really work.
No, I'll be honest. I find the same sometimes with videos. Like as someone who makes videos for tutorials and things, I I like the videos, but I always find that I kind of want I want to go see the code, or I like it to reference something. You know, whenever I've in the newer content I'm working on, one of the things that I'm trying to do heavily is, okay, just say like, okay, well, we can go through and show you how to build something here, but also here's the 900 links you're going to want to go out to the actual documentation if you're someone like me, because you know you need to know the background of where things are.
I completely agree. And I think, sort of skipping ahead, I know we were going to talk about the work at Salesforce Ben later, but that is the ethos that I've put into our learning platform. So I noticed that we had content out there that was really text heavy, and then there was content which was almost purely video. And I'm like you, I can't stand video, which everyone thinks is hilarious because I make lots of videos, but it's not my learning style at all. So one of the things that I've done with our courses platform that I've set up is everything has a written lesson, and that will, written content about a feature, step-by-step tutorial, but we'll also include a video if that's your thing, where we might review how we set it up, or go back in and say, right, we've set this up, how can we edit this now? Because that's actually a really useful skill for people to know, not just how to set something up, but how to then amend it afterwards. And then links out to other useful resources like Trailhead or Salesforce help articles, so you kind of have the option, no matter what your learning style is or what you want to do, you've got that in front of you. So I think that's good because it suits lots of different learning styles, and hopefully it caters to people like you and I who really want to dig deep into things and go and read all about it.
Yeah, well, do you know, I think the other thing that is big for me on the coding side is that I watch a lot of coding video tutorials that have nothing to do with Salesforce in many areas, and it's really good being able to see some code on screen and go, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and I can see them typing it out and working it out. But as yet, and I imagine OpenAI at least are probably working on this, but someone's working on it. But there's no way of copying text from a video, and you like I can't pause a YouTube video and magically copy the text that's on the screen and copy it. And so you end up with these situations where, especially for a high level thing where it's like, here's how you add a button onto a Lightning web component. Do you know what? Yeah, that's like one line. It's dead easy. But here's a 13-step wizard written in Lightning web components, or here's like a detailed batch Apex class. There's no way you can actually do that. And typing it across is just painful.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And I think it comes back to what you were saying earlier about, certs, yay or nay. Are they good? Are they that useful? And I think they are, but nowhere near as useful as playing around in something yourself. So one of my favorite things when I was kind of learning was to find something that was sort of what I was looking for and then copy it and then play around with it until it did what I wanted. So if I was looking for formulas and validation rules and little bits and pieces, then I would kind of find something close and then mess around with it until it was what I needed it to be. And I think that really does teach you how to create things.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's I remember when I was first learning, Apex, that was one of the things I did a lot of, was similar to that, sort of taking someone else's code and saying like, all right, how do I break this and then fix it again? Or text it. The other thing that I've tried to encourage people to do whenever they've asked me about like, how do you learn and how do you is I always try to do things that you weren't meant to on it, which is not break it. No, there's a very big difference between breaking something and doing it. But like a really good example was when I say things you're not meant to, I mean things that either have zero practical purpose or you can do, but why would you? So a good example is years ago I wrote an AI algorithm on Salesforce, like on using Apex, and this was prior to any like Einstein stuff. I'm going to say Einstein didn't exist. Obviously, the concept of Einstein as a name existed, but Salesforce weren't doing it. Like, you should not do that in Apex. Apex is not a good language for it, but you learn a bunch of weird things doing it. Same with like me and so that was with a lady called Jennifer Wire, who was a colleague of mine, and we just did this weird thing and showed it at Dreamforce, got a free ticket, and that was it. And immediately stood on stage and said, "No one use this code in production ever because it's wrong." I did another one with a guy called Vincent Reader on like building a VR system. No one needs a VR system in Salesforce. Absolutely no one. Like, it was just this stupid thing that you could press a button and it would fire a firework on it. It was interesting enough to learn stuff, but there's no practical application for A, viewing fireworks in Salesforce, and B, that like, who needs to see, like, can you imagine an Apple Vision Pro and seeing your like lead screen in front of you? Like, what's that going to do for you? But you learn a lot by doing these things about like where the edge cases are and what the nuances of the platform are. So I do try and encourage people, if they ask me, is to try and do something odd.
Yes. I think if you can put it into context that really resonates with people, and so I think this goes back to both teaching, if you're doing user training, if you're teaching anyone anything, try and put it in a context that they understand. So maybe build something that seems a bit irrelevant but makes sense to you. So one of my favorite things to do is to think about subscriptions like magazines, or to come up with something like, and this is silly, but one of my prized possessions is my bin in my kitchen. It's a very swish, fancy bin, and I love it. I got it, and it was really cheap. It should have been much more expensive, and I thought it'd probably been put through the till wrong, and so I was elated to get this bin, and it requires special bin bags because it's a special size.
What does the bin do so wonderfully? So again, this is way off topic, but like, what's so special about the bin, Christine?
I have a flat in Bristol, in the UK. Real estate is at a premium, so I have a 2-bedroom flat, and it's about the size of a rabbit hutch. It's very, very small, and I have a very small kitchen. And I was struggling to find a bin that didn't take up too much room, and then I found this bin. It's a rectangle, which I really like, and it's just the perfect size for my kitchen. So there's nothing that special about it.
I was expecting you to say it's one of the ones that like compacts things, or
no, nothing that exciting. But I have to get my special bin bags, and I have them on a subscription through Amazon. And I just think about that sort of scenario. So when I'm trying to explain things to people about Salesforce, I will talk to them about my bin and my special bin bags and how I have them on subscription. And I think what's quite good about it is obviously it's really daft, and people remember it because they're like, yes, that bonkers Christine and her bin. I remember now how product subscriptions work.
I mean, that I'm just going to clip that bit where you say, well, it's rectangular, and I like rectangles. That's just going to be a clip that we're going to have out there forever and ever.
Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. Just share that with people.
I can't wait to just reread that in the transcript. So away from bins and back to where you were working as a solo admin. We talk about being an accidental admin and things. So, one of the things I know you've been heavily involved in is user groups and community groups as well. And so, and forgive me because I struggle to keep up with who's doing what all the time. But you're still running. Is it the Bristol group you're still involved in running? Yeah.
Yes. I've been leader of the Bristol group for since 2019. So quite a long time now, and I now have a co-leader who's been with me for I think about 2 years now, Angus. So I did it by myself for a while, and that was a bit miserable.
Yeah, it's running a community for anyone who has never run a community group. So I used to run the Leeds developer group, and last year when there was a few changes, with kind of changes in jobs and things like that, I sort of stepped back and we kind of shut the group down. But they can be soul destroying when you're like running. We had one where we had 2 in a row, and this was kind of the thing that stopped us from doing it. We were running them sort of fairly regularly, and then we had 2 months in a row there was just me and the other organizer turned up.
Oh, we've never had that.
Yeah, and it was, and we reach out to people, we get a bunch of people saying, yeah, we'll turn up and do it, and then and it may have been just the time of year with like the weather and sort of other things like that. But they can. So for anyone who is thinking of going to a community group and goes, I can't bother tonight, or like, just there's a lot of behind the scenes work and like kind of love and soul that goes into them, and it can be soul destroying if like you expect, you put all that work in, don't you? And then hopefully people turn up.
It is, because it's hard, right? Because you have to get people to speak. So you need to find speakers, and you might need sponsorship as well. And that's quite hard to find. And especially if you're not London based or near London,
it's getting a space to an event venue, and like
people laugh when they come to the Bristol user group, because when we went back to in-person meetings, I needed to find somewhere that would let us have the room for free, as long as, we purchased food and drinks. And so I found somewhere, and it's basically in the basement of a pub next to the toilets. And you can sort of hear the sound of the hand dryer. And the pub is also like a little brewery as well. So sometimes the extraction's going, which is quite loud for the brewery, and sometimes it smells slightly strange. And people would definitely be like, this is a bit of a weird venue, but it's free. And that's really hard to find. And I think you just have to accept it's quirky, not weird. It's different.
And I think you're right. Outside of London, like it can be very hard to find locations that aren't. And it is that free thing. Like so, a little bit for behind the veil here for again people who attend but aren't aware of these things. Is that so? You get a Salesforce provider stipend stipend. Yes, small amount of cash that goes towards it, and by the time you bought food and drinks, or sometimes had to pay for a room, that goes very quickly. Very, very quickly. And so you end up looking for sponsors and things like that. But there's always this fine balance as well of having sponsors that are there to help and assist, and not sponsors that are there to just kind of dominate the meeting. It's a real like conundrum. I feel your pain fully in the holding it in the base. We did it in an upstairs room of a pub a few times, and there was one year we had Skip Sauls. So Skip, who is involved in what is now Tableau's CRM, but Einstein Analytics, he was really, really big on that. He's one of the product managers, and there was genuinely a meeting where I was stood there holding in the HDMI cable because the fixture was loose, and just stood there for 20 minutes doing that. For people who are listening and not watching, I'm just stood with my arm in the air, just holding a cable in for 20 minutes whilst he was presenting, because the connection was dodgy. He had to connect to, I think, my phone for 3G because the Wi-Fi was down. You get all sorts of oddities, don't you?
Oh, completely. People did ask why I moved them to the basement of this pub, because before COVID, we had met in a different pub. But we did try to go back there. Someone had kicked in the plug sockets, kicked in the connection for the HDMI, just like you. Wow. And so it had to be plugged in. There was this weird sort of connection in the ceiling. So someone had to climb up on a desk to plug it in, and it was really faulty. It's really difficult. What I would say, though, is I've never had not very many people show up. The Bristol Salesforce community is phenomenal. We are a small but mighty little group down here, and it's very different. Everyone that comes to the admin group here in Bristol always says that it's a very different experience to other groups, and I think that's because we are relatively small. We cover the sort of southwest, and there's not that many of us. But people do come every single time, and they get on really, really well. They come more for the socializing and the free pizza and beer than they do for the Salesforce side of things. And they're so willing to participate. We have stupid quizzes and games, and we try to keep it entertaining. And I feel like they put up with me and my user group leadership really well.
Oh, that's good. It's good to hear about groups, sort of doing well. And as I say, I know from personal experience like how hard they are. So all kudos to yourself for keeping them, and running a small group. I think in an area that is one of the things that we always struggle with in when we were running the Leeds one is that it's in Leeds. So whilst there's a few companies that use Salesforce in Leeds, you've got a sort of diverse geographic area for people to come into. Whereas with London, it's everyone's 10 minutes away on the tube. Yeah,
Yeah.
for some of the more regional ones, it is quite difficult to get in. So yeah, I can only applaud you for keeping it up and
Yeah.
maintaining it.
And I think for me as well, because we are an in-person group, although we can get people, we can get speakers to kind of join in virtually, it doesn't have the same feeling. So I do try to avoid that wherever possible and have in-person speakers, because it's a lot more engaging and people can ask more questions, and whoever's speaking can get to know the people in the group as well. But again, that makes it that bit harder, because finding those people who are either in Bristol or the surrounding areas or can come to Bristol, and if there's one thing my user group don't like to do is speak themselves. So
Yes, it's one of those things, encouraging people to get to speak, because they are really friendly, kind of safe spaces. But yeah,
yeah,
it's difficult to go. I think one of the things that I like about community groups, though, is that they are very much safe spaces for people to get to kind of meet with each other and learn from each other. And yeah, I remember the first one I went to was one of the London groups. It was the London Developer Group many years back, and it was being run by, I think, Wes Nolte was still running it with Kia. So like Wes was the CTO of Tequila, who were bought by
yeah,
Accenture many years. But like, so yeah, it was a long time ago. And I ended up just sat, haphazardly next to between two people. One of whom was Stoney Grunno, who runs Sales Bolt, and I was the founder of Breadwinner. And
mm-hmm.
Stoney and I had a 10-minute chat, and I have known him for about 12 years and catch up with him regularly at just events. And the other was Anup, who ran the developer group for a while afterwards. And it's incredible how like you can make such good lifelong friends from just sort of sat down and chatting to them for 5 minutes. But I remember that first group, though, just being petrified of like, who's in here, who do I know, and especially when you go to some and there are there was Kia there, and he's
He's a big deal.
Well, yeah, back then he was Kia was like 90% of the developer forums back at that point. So yeah, it was pretty much him, and that was it. It was unbelievable.
Yeah, it can be really, really scary. My first user group, I went to the Bristol user group once, maybe a year or so after getting my first full-time admin role. And I didn't have imposter syndrome at that point. I've always thought you can learn whatever you want. If you want to do something, you can do it. You can learn it. So I was happily teaching myself and working out how to do things. And then I went to my local user group, and it was smaller, I would say, than it is at the moment. And everybody knew each other. And most of the people all worked for the same consultancy. And it was just very, very scary. There was only myself and two other ladies. Everyone else was male.
Mm-hmm.
And someone said to me, sort of, who are you? And I said, I'm Christine, I'm a Salesforce admin. And their response was, no, you can't be, otherwise we'd know who you were.
Oh, wow. That's not cool, that.
I'm sure it wasn't meant to be hurtful, but it didn't feel good. It felt kind of embarrassing, like I wasn't meant to be there. So I didn't go back to my user group for years. And I went back not long before I actually then took it over as the leader. So what I did instead was I went to London's Calling about a year later and had a very different experience. I was super nervous after that experience of the user group. And I remember going to London's Calling, and again, I recognised all these people from Twitter, including Keir, funnily enough. Keir looks just like his picture, so he's really easy to spot. And I went there, and I was so nervous, and I knew absolutely no one. And there were a few people that spoke to me that day, 3 in particular. One of them, funnily enough, is a chap called Barry, who is actually from just outside of Bristol and comes to my user group and is one of my closest Salesforce friends. Barry is absolutely wonderful. And then there was another lovely chap there who actually introduced me to his boss at the time, who was Amanda. Lovely Amanda, of of the London admin group, who's no longer with us, but I met her as well. Frightened the life out of me, because she has so much energy, and she was just terrifyingly confident. And so I really remember that event vividly, and I saw these speakers. I thought they were incredible. I saw Louise Lockie, a lady that's now at Salesforce, Julia, and I just loved it. I thought, this is amazing, and I learned so many things and thought, I would like to do this myself. And that was kind of the start of it, everything snowballing into speaking at events and blogging, running the user group, working at Salesforce Ben.
That's incredible. Yeah, it's the Amanda, who, as you say, sadly passed away not that long ago, but Amanda was one of those people that no matter how many times I met Amanda, the first 5 minutes in Amanda's presence were always like a tornado. Just like, sort of, you'd see her, and Amanda, I heard this story once about Jeff Goldblum, and this is very tangent, but there's a story where apparently this guy was at a party, and he was introduced to Jeff Goldblum, and he goes, "Oh, this is," and whoever introduced him said, "Oh, hi Jeff, this is Christine." He goes, "Christine Marshall." He goes, "Oh, Christine Marshall, it's so good to meet you. Wow, that's amazing." And then he said he heard him 10 minutes later being introduced to someone else and doing exactly the same thing. And apparently Jeff Goldblum, his way of meeting people is to kind of do that. I always felt with, like, Amanda was never fake or anything like that, but she had this real way in energy of just meeting people, and after the first 30 seconds with them, just being like, wow, just, everyone sort of being like, oh yeah, Amanda's wonderful and I know her, and she made everyone feel very, very comfortable and kind of at home in places. It was always fun going to the and I know I saw that Todd and Robert actually celebrated the admin group in London had run on time and on schedule the other day. But it's the admin group, when with her and Louise running it, was always just a whirlwind and mania of excitement, fun, and like friendliness. And I think that's really kind of an interesting thing about like the community and going to some of these events is that there's hopefully now, and Todd hit on this in his interview we did and the discussion we had with him the other day about, there's a lot more safe spaces, I feel now, and I think a lot of work has been done to make more of the spaces more safe and more welcoming, and hopefully they are, and people don't feel that. And I'd hope that people now feel that there's more opportunity to reach out to people and engage with, because talking about like we'll take Kira as an example, right? Kira is
You're obsessed, Paul. You're obsessed with Kira.
I know. Yeah, we won't move the camera around and just show you the little poster I've got on the wall. But so Kira is a person who has been an MVP for God knows how long and has contributed and still contributes more actively than most people I've ever met to the community. But he is just a sort of very seriously down-to-earth, normal chap who's always very friendly, very welcome to say hello to people. And again, I don't think Keir will mind me saying that he is just a normal bloke who just happens to enjoy going along to events and speaking to people. And there is a lot of, everyone in the community is just that. There is no need to put people on any sort of pedestal because of some sort of little badge they have or coloured hoodie they have or whatever it might be. But I think particularly those people who are more out there and exposed, I would offer up, if you're ever at an event and I'm there and you are feeling like you don't know who to talk to, and just feel free to come over and say hello and introduce yourself and we'll have a chat, because we've all been there, and I'm sure you're the same, Christine.
Completely. And it's one of the things I try to do whenever I'm at an event now, if I meet someone, is to try and introduce them to more people. So that, especially if they've gone to the effort of introducing themselves to me, I think it's really nice to help them make connections with other people as well. So I'll always be like, oh, this is such and so, they work here, this is their job title. And I'm quite good at remembering things about people. So I will, maybe drop in, they have 5 cats, or,
just they've got this amazing bin.
It was an amazing bin. Yeah, whatever unique. I try and look for ways that people have similarities and try and introduce them and give them something to talk about as well.
Yeah.
So I do think that's really, really important. I also think it's important to accept that a lot of people in this community are relatively introverted, and this doesn't necessarily come naturally to them. So don't be put off by people who look like they're sort of rushing or that have, that angry face. My work face, my concentration face, looks like I want to kill someone. It's just so focused. And I have to remember to smile. And there was a bit of controversy around the Dreamforce in the last 2 years about MVPs being not particularly friendly or not particularly approachable.
Okay.
And I thought that was really interesting because I think, of course, there's always going to be people like that. But actually, I think a lot of the time is people just don't, people are very introverted and they find it as hard as you. So not to be put off and just look for someone who's happy to have a conversation. Like you say, if you're at an event and myself and Paul are there, come and have a chat.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the introversion is an interesting thing because it's also... So I remember having this conversation a while ago with, I think it was Kerry Townsend, and I'm going to say it's Kerry, and Kerry can take
Kerry goes live.
Yeah, I was going to say Kerry could take the blame for this, but no, there is no blame to partition for it. If I say something wrong, it was me. But Kerry and I were talking about the world of MVPs, and I think the introversion. The first part I'd say is that yes, a lot of us. I include I'd say I'm an introverted extrovert, which means that I'm really, really like being around people and with people. But it takes me a minute or two when I walk into a place to like warm up. Like if you ever see me walk into an event and like start to say, I'm quite happy just stood by myself for a little bit. Like, there is, I take a little bit of time to kind of get into a networking pool kind of mood. And so there's a lot of introverted people out there, but when you're contributing to a cloud system and the ecosystem around it, you are doing so over the internet. As me writing a blog post or releasing a video on YouTube or putting a course together on Udemy or whatever it might be, does not involve me talking to anyone else. This is a very social way of releasing content, isn't it? It's if you think about what you could be, if you write a blog post, it's normally you sitting down by yourself, writing the post, sending it to someone else via email to go, have I made any typos or problems in it? And then sending it. Writing the books I wrote was me sat down for hundreds of hours by myself staring at a screen. It's very, very introverted still.
Yeah.
And so just because these people seem like they are contributing a lot out there and posting things, it's that online veneer of it's really easy to post things on LinkedIn. And I've received messages from people on LinkedIn about things that have been I got a message from someone once about my book that was, and I give them the benefit of the doubt because English is their second language, and it was written in a way that I put my back up. I'll be really honest, because you write a book and you put yourself out there, and do you know what? Not everyone's going to like it, and I would hope that if you've spent your 20 quid on the book, you'll get 20 quid's worth of, I'm going to say enjoyment, but something out of it, even if for nothing else, the resale value might might be there, but. They wrote this thing, and I was a bit, as I say, my back was up. I politely responded politely, and okay. And then I bumped into the person in real life, and they were completely different to what I'd gathered over this message. And they were friendly, they were warm, they were sort of really wanting to have a chat with me, and almost it was at an event, and they kind of almost wanted to. I could tell that they were slightly introverted at the event and didn't know many people. And so we're sort of stood chatting to me because I was chatting to other people, and so I involved them in the conversation, got them going in the conversation. But it does show you that kind of behind the screen thing, if you know what I mean. It still happens in this world. So I do think that, there is very much that piece of behind the screen that's on there.
Yeah.
And second of all, it's just, people are in general I would say in the technology space, I think, more introverted than people sometimes think.
Yes, and I think it's interesting because it goes both ways, doesn't it? You know, someone can be nice pie online and actually not really interested in connection in real life, and vice versa. Someone can come across as very brusque online and be a really warm person in real life. I mean, I'm an introvert through and through, and it's not that I don't like people, but I don't get energy from
Yeah.
social situations. I find social situations draining, which again is a bit ironic because a lot of what I do is go to events and meet lots of people. But I love it, I enjoy it, but then I really need my downtime afterwards. So
Mm.
I enjoy it while I'm there, and then I really enjoy going home and being alone. And
Yeah.
I'm very happy by myself. But I think I also, as an introvert, what I know about myself is that I love one-on-one time with people in small group. So, you know, instead of going, I remember years ago when I first went to like a world tour and I wished I knew about the parties or that I'd registered or someone would invite me. And now I'm not interested. I'd rather go for a small dinner with 2 or 3 other people and have a real good heart to heart about what's going on and some in-depth conversation. And that I find very energy giving.
Yeah, definitely. I think the after parties thing is a really interesting one because there's so many things going on after all these events. Like after London's Calling, there's always a lot of food and drink that's there, and people can party and enjoy. And there's even things such as dancing. And I know it's
IT introverts dancing.
this is it. It's I mean, there's a very select group of people that have seen me dance, and none of them have anything to do with Salesforce, and nor will anyone ever see me. It's not for public consumption, and but there is that thing, and going back to we were saying a second ago, when I was chatting with Kerry, one of the other things we said is that a lot of people who are MVPs and things like that have been given a public platform and forum, but haven't. There's no MVP handbook that says here's how you should engage with people online, and here's how you should be nice to people, and here's how you should be. So going back to your point about people perhaps perceiving people as being off, there's not. I was at India Dreaming a number of years ago, and I was walking. It's a fantastic event. There were lots of wonderful people I met there who were really interested in chatting with me, and getting to know about what I was doing and talking about lots and lots of different things. But there was a weird period where I was walking down this in between 2 rooms, and I was there with Ricky Hovgaard and Rad Radkova, both of whom work for Salesforce, and wonderful, wonderful people. And as I was going down, there were people that was asking me to stop and have a photo taken with me. Now, I don't know. I mean, there must have been a surplus of dartboards in India that needed some target for sticking up there. But the idea of people wanting to have a photo taken with me is mind-bogglingly odd, right? At the best of times. But the weirdest thing about it was that some of the people didn't want to engage with me. And I hated that, where it was people that would come up and stand there and ask for a photo, and I'd say, yeah, and I'd try and do, what's your name? And try and introduce yourself. And they were just like, not wanting to talk, and walked away. I was like, well, that just felt so, that it's the briefest fleeting moment of celebrity I've ever had. And I can completely understand like why actual celebrities could get really, really narked off about people doing. But that sort of stuff, there is no. You don't get told how to handle someone coming over and asking you for a photo, which and I think there's also part of that is there's differences in culture. There's differences. It's different if it's different between me being asked for a photo and you being asked for a photo, and what level of comfort you have with people taking photos, and how people want to stand with you and stand next to you. I don't want to use the phrase touch you, but touch you, if you know what I mean. It's very, very difficult to navigate sometimes.
It is very difficult. And I think actually you're right. It's like a tiny glimpse into the world of real celebrity and what that must feel like if you have that all the time. Culturally, I think it's very different depending on where you are. I know that when I'm in America, people will come up and want to talk and have a picture taken, and they'll be very open with it. They're happy to ask. But I've been to other events in different countries where they clearly don't want to ask. And I do remember I went to an event a few years ago, and I could sense people were pointing at me. They were looking at me and pointing at me and then talking amongst themselves. And I thought, well, hopefully they're just like, oh, that's Christine who writes at Salesforce Ben. That would be the good side of what's going on. Otherwise, I must have like something on my face. But I didn't know.
I'll be honest, I'm very used to being out in public and people just pointing at me and looking weird. So but no, it is a really strange phenomenon and thing. This isn't for those listening, and hopefully we're not boring you by me and Christine sounding like we're some sort of aren't we wonderful? But I think that there's a very interesting thing about interacting with people and the social anxiety and just the social interactions in general at events and how that all comes together. As a funny aside story, I mentioned to Christine before we started, my wife does Salesforce, and I brought her into the ecosystem. And the very first year she came to World Tour, we were walking through just the exhibition hall, and it was when it was sort of 6,000 people was a huge number. I heard that there's 16,000 people going to be there next week, Christine. So yeah. So you and I will both be sort of Friday just wanting no one to talk to us. But someone came over and said to me, and like introduced themselves, asked for a picture, and was talking to me and saying about they liked what I'd done or written. And sort of my wife stood there, and she's like, did you pay them? Have you prearranged this to look like a big shot or whatever? Genuinely it was not, but it is a very, very strange thing to think about. How people want to engage with you and do things. It's very, very odd. But yeah.
Yeah, I would never want to discourage people from doing it, though. I have to say I get messages online, especially on LinkedIn, from people that are probably the best parts of my day at this point. People who send real messages about, I read this blog, or I used this course, or, watched something like this podcast and it really resonated, or it helped me through something. For me, that's the best. That's the best part of it. But also, top tip for you, Paul, at World Tour, which is next week, you can like sit under the stairs and nobody realizes you're there. I've been doing that for years.
I'm going to be still on the stand all day, so I'm going to be front and center. I'm going to one of the parties Thursday night, which is with a group around some sort of investment discussions, and my plan is Friday to sit on a train and to not open my mouth for about 12 hours, which is I'm sure will be blissful for my wife when I do get home. But it's it is an intense thing. But to your point, that I would if anyone is listening to this and sees me and or Christine at events, please do come over and say hello.
Yes.
And chat. And I love it when I get messages about I've read your book, I really like this thing and it helped me understand this, or and I've received a lot of them, and they do genuinely make your day. So if you've ever liked something like anyone's done, if it's me and Christine, definitely message us, because we need that self-validation. We want that. We need that and feed off of that. But in general, one of the things I was trying to do with my kind of CloudBites weekly thing as well is just share cool things that people are doing, because there's so many people producing good content out there that there's people that like yourself, and let's take you in particular. You produce a lot of content on a lot of blogs for Salesforce Ben. I will occasionally retweet one of them or mention one of them when I think they're useful. You've got a very big platform. You don't need me going, Christine's doing a great job, and but like for people who are doing things that are on a much smaller, less noticeable scale, I think it can hopefully be a nice thing where someone goes, oh, that's been recognized and seen, and if there is something that a creator of any type is doing that you like, spend 2 minutes, reach out to them and say, I really love this and enjoyed it. And if you see them at an event, go over and say it as well. It makes your day.
And also, if there is anyone doing like great things, especially around blogging, tell them, but tell me as well, because I write a lot of content for Salesforce Ben. I love to write technical content, but as we've expanded, I've kept hold of some of the non-technical stuff because I love to write it. So the top blogs for admins and developers, people to follow online. I have a specific one for women to follow in the Salesforce ecosystem as well. And I love doing those things because I spend loads of time trawling the internet, looking at, what people are doing, the interesting things that they're doing. But of course, I can't find all of it, especially if someone's maybe not got a huge following yet, and I haven't come across them. So I suppose that's the other thing I would say is if you're doing something, let me know. Maybe
definitely
share the word.
Yeah, share it, and is that if I am always looking for content for the weekly newsletter. So if you are doing something and you think it's worthwhile, even if it doesn't make it into the newsletter, I promise you I will read it or digest it and let you know my thoughts. Send it through. So we've talked about a bit about sort of events and some of the interaction of that, and obviously we've kind of mentioned a few times that you work for Salesforce Ben. So Salesforce. When we say Salesforce Ben here, we are talking about the collective brand.
Yes.
not just Ben himself stood there like some sort of evil overlord over everyone. We love you, Ben. I'm sure you're not an evil dictator, and Christine can't say it on the podcast anyway. But no. So you joined Salesforce Ben about 3.5 years ago during COVID, wasn't it?
Yes. I had been at my previous role. I was a solo admin for an engineering company. I loved my job. But I'd already started blogging, freelance blogging for the Salesforce Ben. And I was writing more and more often. And so Ben and Lucy asked if I would be interested in joining Salesforce Ben, the company, full time. And that was in November of 2020. And everyone said I was bonkers. Like, you can't leave a secure job in the middle of a pandemic to go and that's not even a business. That's not a real job. And I was like, no, it is. It's a company. But that's not the first time this has happened. So what I didn't tell you actually about my first Salesforce admin job at Capita was the job that I left when I told my boss that I was going to be a full-time Salesforce admin. He told me it was the biggest mistake I'd ever make. It was a stupid decision, and that I'd be pigeonholed as just a Salesforce admin.
Oh, wow.
I know.
That's
Yes. I find that when people tell me something's a really bad idea, it tends to turn out it's quite a good idea.
Yeah. Yes. If someone, I was once told that. So my first Salesforce job was at Financial Force, and after a year, there'd been a number of changes internally, and it just didn't feel like it was the right place at the time. And after 12 months, so I'd had a job for 6 months when I finished university, and that was a job for 12 months. I remember just being like, I'm gonna go do something else. I wanted to go and do something different. And I remember being told the same thing, like, why are you leaving like a well-funded, bigger company and doing these things? And lo and behold, the next company I went to, I did not get paid for 3 months at the end of it, which was a bit mad. But by and by, like, it worked out, So yeah, there is a lot of that around about crazy new things.
Yeah, you have to take chances, though. I mean, if I didn't take chances and if I didn't have that sort of self-belief that I can do kind of whatever I put my mind to, then I wouldn't be working in the Salesforce ecosystem. I wouldn't blog. I wouldn't be speaking at conferences. I wouldn't be working at Salesforce Ben. And I wouldn't have found myself with a platform with such a big audience that I can really share things that are useful to people, to really spread the word about things that I think are really important, like equality. If I didn't have such a big platform, then I could be sharing things and they wouldn't be reaching the audience I want them to reach.
Yeah, I think that the taking chances is, I think that I have to state here that I know I am very lucky that I have been able to take chances and take some risks. Last year, choosing to decide to work for myself and start an ISV and be doing the other things. I was very lucky to be able to do that because of other decisions that I'd done in the past and the position I was in to do. Not everyone can. Yeah. Not everyone has that ability. I have a supportive wife who is happy to help out and let me do my thing and be crazy, but not everyone has that. So I would yeah, I agree with you that I think taking those chances and opportunities where you get them is a great idea if you can. But also,
Yes.
I think as well, the more you say yes to things, the more opportunities come, and the easier it is for those opportunities to be the right ones.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's a snowball effect. I got asked to lead my local user group, and I think, obviously, I wasn't really going because I'd had that horrible experience. And they only really knew to ask me because I was on social media and they sort of knew that I was active in the community, even if I wasn't that active in the Bristol community. So having my name out there got me that role. But I do think you made such a good point that everyone's journey is very different and everyone's circumstances are very different. I get a lot of people, especially women, asking me, how I do the things that I do, how do I make the time for it? And the truth is that I have no children. I have no
Mm.
dependents. I have no pets. I have a very supportive boyfriend who has zero interest in IT or Salesforce. And I just, I have that level of freedom to be able to take risks, leave jobs, try new things, to travel. And that's very different for a lot of other people. So I think you should never compare to someone else. And whilst it may look like they're doing all of the things, that's never the reality. What is presented
No.
online is never. That's about 10% of the truth.
Oh, exactly. I am as a prime example. So I have no children, no pets. I have a couple of house plants, and that's about it. And so it's just me and my wife, and it has meant that years ago I was a company I used to work for where when we moved into this house, there was I was away the week we exchanged, so I landed back Thursday. We moved house on the Friday, moved everything in, and then on the Sunday I flew back out to a different place. And there was, I think, the first month and a half we were here, both me and my wife were away for a good significant portion of that, just because of, I think she was home more than I was, but I think I did like 4 or 5 countries in about 6 weeks. And I remember talking to my new neighbours, and they're like, "Oh, we've not seen you around since you moved in. Where have you been?" I was like, "Oh, away for work." And they're like, "Anywhere nice?" And sort of, you nonchalantly list off, well, I was in San Francisco, and then I had to go to Chicago, and then after that it was over to Madrid, and then to Paris for a few days, and they're like, "That sounds really exciting." And what they're not realizing is that you are sort of getting to go see meeting rooms in. I've seen the inside of many a hotel, and all meeting rooms are very, very lovely, but it's just slightly different cups and arrangements of tables in a horseshoe occasionally, or sometimes it's around a board table. Yeah, and that's it. It's you are just doing some. It might seem that people are doing some exciting. I always think of Charlie Isaacs. I see Charlie's Twitter feed, and Charlie's forever flying everywhere. And a lot of people might be looking at that, and Charlie's a happy, excited, interesting guy who's enjoying what he's doing. But there's a lot of reality where Charlie is just sat in like departures, watching a board, waiting, waiting for his thing to his gate to get called. And so there is a certain amount of, as you say, the cool side of it, where yes, you get to go to Paris and San Francisco and see these things. You might get a couple of meals out in decent restaurants somewhere and see a bit, but it's not, when you go to Paris for work, you're not spending your day outside the Eiffel Tower. I've not done Salesforce implementation for the Louvre yet, or it's as yet Disney World in Florida have not asked me to go and spend 3 weeks on site learning about the business. So I mean, it's I once had a brewery that were interested in Salesforce, and I was like, this is going to be brilliant. And they're just like, well, we don't need you to come in. You can work. Right. So even a brewery where I was like, that'd be great. I could just go and spend a couple of days and sample. Yeah, nope.
I think the thing with Charlie is you see Charlie all over the place, all over Twitter and stuff, but he does like drive-by selfies. If you actually watch him at an event, he's just constantly on the move, and he'll suddenly like quick selfie with people, and then he's on the move again. So you wonder how he gets around. It's because he's just flying around the conference.
That man has Duracell like somewhere plugged into it. Like it's unbelievable how he does it. But that, to go back to what we were saying is that that ability to do that sort of travel and things has opened up different opportunities for me. That if I had my for example, my brother who has my nephew, he could not just be like, I'm off next week to the world tour and I'm staying for a couple of nights. I'm doing a bunch of things with it. My brother couldn't be like, all right, great, just leave the 2-year-old and off I go for a couple of days. Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
No, not at all.
So yeah, it is a very important thing to talk, to think about, making sure you take those opportunities where they come, but the right ones for you. And speaking of that, then, so your role now as a technical content director. So what's your role at the moment in Salesforce Ben entail, and is it all things content, or is it just specific types of content?
So when I started at Salesforce Ben, one of the main things that Ben and Lucy wanted to do was set up an e-learning platform. So that was going to be a big part of my role, was to create and run the e-learning platform. 50% of my role, and the other 50% would be creating content for the main site, so the blogs, YouTube videos, that kind of thing. So I did that. And my e-learning platform is 2.5 years old. It turns 3 years old in October. We're currently just working on version 2, which is really exciting. So I've done that, but the company has expanded. So when I joined, there were technically 3 full-time employees, and none of them were Ben. So it was myself.
There was a good period where Salesforce Ben did not include Salesforce Ben.
Ben was doing writing, but he had another job. He had another full-time job. So it was myself and Lucy and Lottie as well. And then since then we've grown. Ben did then decide to join us full-time. And now I think I honestly lose track because we're growing so fast, but we have 24, 25 employees.
I think Lottie told me 25 the other day when I saw her at an App Exchange event.
Yeah, and I've been there for like 3.5 years. So it's been huge growth. What that has meant, though, is that we have quite a lot of people who are not from a Salesforce background, who are not sort of admins or devs by trade. And we really want to make sure, like I said, us and a lot of other people have definitely been doing a lot of career content, a lot of entry-level content, higher level feature overviews, and less in that really in-depth technical content. So earlier this year, my role was changed to be technical content director. So I'm still responsible for our e-learning platform, but also responsible for the technical content on the main site. So that is idea generation, looking at trends, like what's interesting, what's not, coming up with content ideas, not just for myself and my team, but also for external people, guest authors who want to write, evaluating ideas that are put forward to us from external people, and just trying to make sure that we are, kind of hitting the mark in terms of what our audience wants to see. We know there's been a huge influx in entry-level people in the last few years, and I think that has meant that the more mid-level senior people have been slightly neglected, if I'm being honest. So that's something that I'm trying to make sure that we are putting out the right kind of content that people want to see, that, dealing with the use cases and the problems that people are genuinely having, and not always just doing what's hot right now. So, AI to death.
Yeah. I do feel like every week I have to stop myself now. Like I try and not have an AI article on the weekly digest every week, because every single week Salesforce announces something that's Einstein XYZ. So yeah, so how do you? So let's talk about the content creation engagement, because I'm going to be selfish here and kind of pick your brains up, because it's one of those things I find really interesting, because. So let's talk about it from 2 perspectives. Number one is that I think Salesforce Ben is very the company. Whenever we say Salesforce Ben, let's just assume we're talking about the company. And if we want to talk about Ben himself, we'll say Ben.
I'm a company.
Ben. But so one of the things I think is really interesting about Salesforce Ben is the breadth of content that's made and the way in which it engages with people. And as someone who is producing content and writing things, I have to give you all the plaudits possible in the amount of stuff you get out. And I know there are 25 of you now that makes me feel a little bit better about the volume you're producing and the quality of it as well. But how do you? So, talk us. I'd love to know what you find. What do you find makes content tick for people? What do you find people actually want in their content? Because it's and I know it's audience dependent, but what do you think are the secrets for if someone's listening now and they're wanting to start a blog or a vlog or whatever whatever the future thing might be? They're doing an Apple Vision Pro, whatever. What would you say are your tips for creating content that works and engages?
So I think, and also, so we've got 25 people, but that's split into different teams. So
for example,
all of the technical content comes through myself and the rest of the technical team. There's sort of three more people, so we review everything technically, and I do quite a lot of ghostwriting and things as well, editing, which is quite fun. And we do that to make sure that the content is doing what it needs to do and is going to tick boxes for people. If I was to give people tips on what makes content engaging with high readability, there's a few things. And I think the first is write about what you know. What are you an expert in? What are your skills in? Don't try writing about something that you don't have any experience in, because people can tell it doesn't feel authentic. And I think what really makes good content on our site is that people can tell when you have experience in something. It's when you can add those personal anecdotes, those personal top tips. Don't do this. I did, and this is what happened. And I think it's tone of voice as well, and that's really dependent on the industry that you're in. But with Salesforce themselves and Trailhead have set this very friendly tone, this more conversational tone, which I really like. And I do find that people engage a lot with my writing, and I think that's because I just try and write like we're having this chat here. So it might just be me sat at my computer at home, but I write like I'm talking to someone at a user group. Oh, you never guess what happened to me this week. This happened and it was terrible, and I had to do this to fix it. And I like that because I think technical content can be super dry and also too technical. And I say this as someone without a technical background. Can we all use layperson's terms, please? I know complicated big words make people feel smart, but they're not very inclusive. And one of the things I try to do is unpick, what does this word even mean? Or what does this phrase even mean? Because lots of people don't know, and then they can't engage with it. I'm doing a talk, and it's actually to do with data lifecycle management. And they wanted to put that in the title, and I was like, oh God, they don't put that in the title, because what does that even mean? That just doesn't resonate with people. So actually the talk is about org growing pains. As your org grows, things become way more complicated. Now that resonates with people. Data lifecycle management, not so much. So it's trying to find ways to give people that kind of context and that terminology without pushing them away and making I don't want anyone to feel inferior or like they don't get something. Because if you don't understand something, it's because it hasn't been explained to you in a way that you can understand. It's not you. I always think it's the thing, the person, whoever's trying to teach you something needs to put it in a context you can understand.
Yeah, no, that's really, really good advice, and really, really interesting to hear you say that, because I think there's two things that pop in my head. Number one is three things that pop in my head. Let's see how many things we get to by the list. Number one is that I mentioned this with Jody on the last episode, where I think the Salesforce ecosystem is going through this interesting period at the moment where, as the platform's grown and it's become a more core IT piece, I think that you're seeing far more people come in with more traditional technology backgrounds, and there's been instances. I am lucky that I used to work in IT before I worked in Salesforce, and that I was a programmer before with other things before I worked with Salesforce, and so a lot of the lingo kind of was not unknown to me. But I know that there's been situations where I've gone into meetings with an enterprise architect from XYZ Global Corp, and they're like, well, and they just spew out these terms, which are all very, very deep technical terms. And what they're trying to say is like, how are we going to integrate these two things? What's the interface, and how are we going to make sure we map across the data? And it's all of these things where I'm trying to come up with something on the hoof there. So I know that's not perhaps the most nerdy technical wording, but I think as you get more people like that, there is that push. And I've seen that in some of the discussions in the community. I mentioned again with Jody that I'm seeing, one of the things I'm seeing on the technical side and developer side is there's a real push from people that have a more structured computer science and development background coming in and looking at Salesforce and almost trying to impose external practices and views upon Salesforce, even though Salesforce is not this other platform that they've come from. And I find that very interesting. So that's thing number one. It'd be interesting to know if you're A, seeing that, and B, if you're thinking about that in some of the content you're writing. But also about that, the idea of the types of content you're doing. Because one of the things I've always tried to avoid, and I hope I avoid, is what I'm going to call like influencer nonsense. And what I mean by that is I never ever want to on Instagram there's this guy who talks about like stuff with plants, and like he sort of has it's how to use like leftover bits to grow new plants, and it just happens on my feed. But he always starts, and he's always like super excited, like have you got like a leftover bit of lettuce? Don't throw it away. Do this, and he's very excitable. And there's lots and lots of we all know what I'm on about when I say like sort of that kind of overly excitable, like, hey guys, welcome to this thing. And I always have tried to avoid doing that. So like I suppose the follow-up question is how have you found that balance of producing technical content, but not, I don't want to use the term clickbaity or like but avoiding the trap of kind of being like of being clickbaity or influencery, where you kind of I've just got this vision of sort of Ben jumping on a video, be like, hey everyone, welcome to this, whoosh, sort of thing.
Well, I suppose the trick is I let Ben do more of that. So
true.
I think is the feedback I get from people about my speaking sessions and my videos is that they're not too influencery, but they're also not awkward. I when I record videos and things, when I'm doing my sessions, I've scripted them myself, and I script them in my like natural tone and language. So I think they come across as me, not as me pretending to be something else. And again, I really do only kind of write and talk about things that I'm really passionate about. I genuinely love Salesforce as the technology. I think what they've done is supremely clever, and I really like the community. So any kind of enthusiasm or excitement I have is genuine. Like right now, this is something that I love to do. I love these conversations. I love sharing knowledge. It makes me feel very passionate. So I think that's one thing. I can't, and I don't want to be that more Americanized, clickbaity type of persona. And I've avoided doing things that would make me appear that way. And I just try and keep it really, really real with people. When I do my talking sessions, I'm not I'm not afraid to talk about things that are meaningful. So I always talk honestly about, so I'm doing the talk at the World Tour next week, which is about goals for admins for this year. And it's actually based on a blog post that I wrote earlier on this year, where I was really honest about the fact that actually over the past year, so in 2023, I had become quite jaded and I'd lost my passion for Salesforce, to be honest, and Salesforce administration, because it was just AI this and AI that. And the reality is that most people are not going to have access to those AI tools anytime soon. This is like a year ago. And for me, that's really boring because I'm like, well, I can't have it. I can't play with it. It doesn't help me with my day job right now. And I just felt like there was nothing else really interesting happening. And that made me feel kind of dejected. So I am going to talk about that next week, about why I think setting goals is important and actually how it can help you kind of get over that feeling of I'm a bit bored or a bit done with this. And I think just by being transparent and being honest with people, people can tell if you're being honest or not. I think that's the reality. And so trying to be something you're not or making things up, people won't ever be very engaged with you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know exactly what you mean about trying to avoid the avoid fake passion, I suppose. One of the things with this conversation, this is Christine and I have started the recording and we'll finish the recording and that's it. Like the editing that goes into this is me just chopping off the bits where I might go and at the end of it, or the weird, awkward me staring at trying to find the mouse pointer on the screen. Because I do genuinely feel with these that the more natural the conversation is, the more it comes across that Christine and I are having a nice chat because we're two people that know each other and get along and can have a nice chat about things, rather than me having saying, Christine, here's a list of 20 questions we're going to ask beforehand, because that's just dull. So yeah, I know exactly, and if it's not clear that this is all being made up, the number of ums and ers probably gives that away.
We'll talk about bins.
The fact that we got Christine recorded saying it's rectangle and I like rectangles is perfect for what we need. I know exactly what you mean though about that kind of honest enthusiasm, and I think that makes a big difference. The worst part of any video or podcast or anything I do is the thing. My least favorite part of this podcast will be at the end where I say please remember to like it and subscribe. But because I feel so. But equally, if you are listening to this, please do like and follow and subscribe, and subscribe to the podcast, or because it does make a difference, and it allows people to see what's going on there, and it helps promote it and all the other things. But I do still, and it might just be being British as well, but it feels very odd sort of asking someone to do something for you when I think it's definitely a cultural thing.
No, it's 100%.
So you mentioned with the and just as another sort of question on the video. So you mentioned you script your videos. So do you and this is a little bit behind the curtain, so you can tell me you don't want to share the secrets of the wizard here, but do you script yours and read them from an auto cue, or do you? So a lot of my with my book reviews, I write down the points I want to hit, and then I kind of, as people will tell by watching my videos, freeball it, but with those points in mind, because I'm one of these people I've always found with talks I've done at London Schooling and things, that I'd rather know the content and what I'm trying to say and the messages I want to get across, and have guidelines on the way rather than me reading it out, because I just can't do that. But how do you find it works best for you?
So for me, it really depends on what I'm recording or doing, and there are a couple of different scenarios. So if we're making content for YouTube, which tend to be sort of 3 to 7 minute videos, where we put animation in and bullet points are coming up on the screen, and then there's just me talking, that is scripted. And that's done from filming and reading off a teleprompter, because it has to be very, very tight, very non-repetitive, in order to be that kind of catchy YouTube video. When I'm creating my training courses on my e-learning platform, I do a lot of screen sharing, and I didn't want it to be other people's contents. There are other people, I suppose you could call them competitors.
Mm-hmm.
I have great respect for the work they do. And for me, I wanted to do something that resonates with me. So when I do my screen shares, I'm showing someone how to create a custom object and build out fields and explaining things to them. I actually share my screen, and then I just have myself in a little talking head bubble at the bottom. And I just do this like I'm doing with you now. And, you kind of see warts and all, how things kind of go wrong and you click the wrong button. But I think that's quite a nice, for me, that feels like, maybe you're learning with a mentor, or if you were working at a company and you're like a junior admin, you could kind of feel like maybe I'm the senior admin and I'm training you. And then coming back to your point, so that's not scripted, that's just on the fly. Yeah. And then coming back to your point about, speaking at conferences, I love that you say you don't. So I don't use speaker notes at all. I don't even write speaker notes, because I think it's really important that you know your content and you know what you're going to say. And the other thing is that when I'm here at the computer at home, I tend to wear glasses. I don't really like contact lenses. So when I go to the conferences, I am slightly blind because I don't wear my glasses. And I couldn't read speaker notes even if I had them.
Yeah, and I always have, I can see without my glasses. I'm not going to walk into the door or anything, but yeah, and I'm the same. Contacts for a long day feel tough. I'm that blind that the other day when I was running, my wife drove past me and I didn't see her in the car. So it's that. I'm going to pretend it was because I was so in the zone, but it was really probably just because it was like, oh, what was that black shape going by in the car? But yeah, that black shaped car just whizzing by, going far too fast, obviously, as she was probably. I find that speaker notes thing interesting, because I also think that comes with experience and confidence, though. Yeah, I going back to a point you made earlier about talk about what you know.
Yeah.
I've coached a few people on speaking and talking at their events, and what I've always tried to do with them is say, if it's your first event and your first time doing it out there, make sure it's a topic that you and I could sit there and have a conversation about, and you could talk about it comfortably and articulately, and not come across like you've never heard of the thing before, and you'll be fine. I think when it comes to speaking event, I've always said to people for your first draft run through, if you need to have a script there and some notes, do it. Some people I know are super hesitant to not have it. But I've always said to people, if by the time it comes to the day, you should have done it 3, 4, 5 times at least, so that you are so comfortable with the beats, the timing, even things that there was one person I was coaching where I was talking to them about even the pauses they give in it, because I think that there's a lot of the art of giving these presentations as well, is not just stood there and going, here is a slide and here are some, don't have bullet points, don't have text, have pictures wherever you can, minimize all these things down there.
Yeah.
But doing that and having that kind of pausing, that cadence, and how you bring the story together around it and tell the story, I think makes it far more engaging than kind of if you just have a lot of bullet points. And that is knowing your content. But if you are doing it for the first time and speaker notes are what you need, go for speaker notes. But the more confident you get with it, I think the easier it is to do that, for definite.
Yeah, completely. And I think, if we're a little bit behind the curtain, talking about what people do, when I first got started, I would script, in a Word document, I would write down what I wanted to say, and then I would read through it. I would read through it, and then I would try to do bits of it without the notes. And then eventually I got to a point where I didn't need the notes at all. I don't do that anymore. I don't write them down. But what I do is I sit here and I put my session up on the screen and I go through my slides as I would, and I talk as if I was talking to the audience. And then I do that a few times. I'd be like, oh, actually, it's, that's not quite right, or that doesn't quite flow. I think something really useful for people to remember, though, if they do want to speak at events and they're really nervous, absolutely talk about something because that will immediately give you confidence. You don't want to and ah and talk too slowly, because that makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about. equally you don't want to rush through it because that makes people nervous and they miss what you're saying. I think the best thing to do is to remember that people have come to your session by choice. You have a topic that they are interested in learning more about. So you already, most of the battle's done. They want to be here.
I remember telling someone once that you have to remember that you're the expert in the room. Like I, as an example, I am not going to go to a session on a beginner admin session about creating a custom object. Like that is not going to be where I'm going to go. Yeah. So the people that are going to that session are going because they want to get some information out that they don't already know. So as you said, you're the expert in the room. If someone sat there saying like, hey, Christine, you've said this about this and I disagree, then they've probably come there by choice to try and be a bit of a pain in the proverbial.
That has happened before several times.
I mean, people like to ask awkward questions and do things, and that can be a thing. Although it's very, very rare, I would say. As just an interesting sort of aside story, I did a talk at London Calling a few years ago where I live coded a server on Heroku, like from scratch, from a blank page. Built out an entire Heroku app so that people could see how it was done and see how easy it was, because Heroku is one of those things that not a lot of Salesforce developers do. I thought it was the worst talk I've ever done. Like I came out of it, and I think it was Anup, who we mentioned before, who was in the front row, and Anup and I are dear old friends, and I love him to pieces. And he was very good at asking a question at the end to make sure there were some questions. But I trust him to give me honest feedback. And I came out and I was like, that sucked. Like that just blew. And I was really down on it. And he was like, that was really kind of good. And I think the reason I say that is that to me, I know how to program a server on Heroku. And if I'm sat there by myself doing it on my own computer screen, I'm not having to talk and remember at the same time. I don't sit there programming going like, I'm going to create this. And no one sits there and goes, I'm going to create a custom object. Let's add a custom field. I'm going to choose formula type. That's not how real life works. And so when you're doing things even I would just encourage people that if they do a talk and when they do a talk, remember that your view of it as well is going to be very different to what the people in the audience are going to feel. And on the flip side is that I am almost certain that I could think of talks that I thought were like the shining example of the best talks I've ever given, and that some people would have been like, yeah, it was all right. It was because there probably wasn't that thing on there. So it's really interesting though that your perception of it is different to the audience's.
Oh, yeah, hugely. So one of my favorite talks, and I did it several times last year at different user groups and conferences, was all about forecasting in Sales Cloud. Because so my background, sales support, lots to do with data analytics, sales forecasting. So I'm really passionate about it. But it's such a niche topic, and I knew it wouldn't be popular. I knew it would mean, sort of probably the smallest crowds I had ever spoken to, but that didn't matter because it was something, if you were interested in forecasting, I knew you would get loads of value out of this session. And that was exactly the feedback I got. And so that was great. Speaking of when things have gone a bit wrong though, similarly, I did a talk at London's Calling about 2 years ago, and I decided to do a live demo, which I do not often do because, as we know, these things can go wrong. And I made like a really, you're saying like talking and demoing feels really unnatural. It's like trying to play a piano if you don't know how to play a piano. And I was like showing how to do this thing on dynamic forms. And I can't remember exactly what I did, but I think I misspelled something. I was filtering on like record type name or something. And I didn't realize. And I went to it, did this and I was like, ta-da! And then it didn't work. So I was like, oh, okay, that's weird. Well, let's just go back into that then and check. And I'd made a typo, but some of my user group friends were there and they were like shouting from the audience, it's a typo. And eventually we got it working and that was fine. Afterwards, the people that knew me said, That was a silly mistake, wasn't it, Christine? You really fat-thumbed, I don't know if that's a saying you
Yeah.
have, fat-thumbed that. But people who didn't know me went, do you know, that was a really good way, that was a really good teaching moment of pretending that you've got it wrong. I was like, I did, no, it wasn't pretending.
Yeah.
It's recorded and on YouTube, so there's no getting away from it ever.
Yeah. No, I think that that would be another bit of advice for anyone who's looking to do their first talk. Do not do anything live. Live programming, one of the things I was talking to Todd about was a video that to me is the pinnacle of videos, which is this guy programming something called the Y Combinator live on stage, and it is just it ticks all the boxes in my nerdy heart for like the wonders of what he's doing, but it's the fact that he's live programming and then like reworking his code live on stage and doesn't miss a beat. It's just brilliant. But I know that he'd also practiced that like 400 times. So yes, do not do live demos. Live demos are for crazy people who want to take them on. But as you say, it is really interesting that your perception and what the audience is different. And again, I've had those things where it's where you're kind of doing something and you're showing something and then it goes wrong and someone's like, oh, that's really clever because you showed us how to debug it. I used to teach for Salesforce. I was one of the trainers for them for a while. And you have this wonderful thing where you're kind of there teaching and like people ask you how things are working, what you're doing. And so you'll often do some live programming to show them bits, or if you're doing the admin course, some live config. And the number of times things go wrong and then you get really good at doing that. All right, this isn't working. What's gone wrong, everyone? What do we think as we debug together? And it's sort of you end up getting the class all on side and working through it. And it's really that's always one of those things that I loved teaching was I knew that I'd done a good job if by Friday I was doing some live coding on something and they were correcting my errors and typos. Because that was like, yes, they've understood this. They've not just been sat there twiddling, sort of like glazing over. They've actually figured out what nonsense I'm on about for a bit. So it does make a big difference. So you mentioned obviously you've got the new version of your learning platform coming out. So is that the big thing that's next for you? What's next, or what's on the horizon for Christine after World Tour and kind of having? So by the time this is released, Christine will have had hopefully like a week after World Tour and be back in wanting to actually talk to anyone. But aside from that immediate kind of pain and excitement, but mainly pain of wanting to just have some downtime. How what's next for you and what are you working on?
So I suppose professionally in my job, my next version of my e-learning platform is the next big thing. It's an absolute passion project for me. I love it. And it's so much fun. We're at the point where we have weekly meetings about the development, and I'm really excited to bring a much better user experience to our learners than they currently have, and hopefully to future learners. So that's probably my big project work-wise. And then personally, I want to do some more certifications. So I like to keep up my knowledge. And what tends to happen is I do nothing, and then I'll do 3 or 4 certs in the space of a month just to get them out of the way. And I've reached that time of the year again where I realize I haven't done anything for quite a while. So I would like to do the strategy designer is one. At some point, I do have to tackle PD1. Mm-hmm. So that's what I would like to do next. So I'm about 11 certs at the moment. Now, numbers really don't matter, except I probably have a little bit of OCD, and I quite like 15 would be a nice number.
A round
I don't
number.
13. 14 would be okay, but 15 would be better. So that's what I do whenever I'm trying to get certs. I'm like, well, I don't want to be on 9. I would like to be on 10. And I've been stuck on 11 for ages, and it's not a great number to be on.
I used to have a thing where I'd try and get a cert, at least one cert every year. And I think last year was the first year I didn't do it. And I can't think of any. I'm trying to think of any like random certificate I got somewhere that 50-meter swimming badge or something that will count. But yeah, like it's an important thing. So okay, so the strategy designer one's next.
Yeah, I
And
think so. Strategy designer, and there's a couple of other ones on the architect pyramid that I want to do. And again, I would stress that it's not a numbers game. It's not about getting all the certs. For me, I think especially in my kind of writing and training capacity, it's really important to make sure that I really know my stuff, especially around things like security. And also, I'm not going to create courses for certifications I haven't done. So that's the other thing.
yeah.
So yes, that's my next thing.
That's a good one. I have taken that strategy designer one myself, and it is a good. It's an interesting course. It's a good exam. It's one that there's some stuff on it that I think people can learn about and get that is not necessarily like normal, if that makes sense. It's a bit out there. I'm trying to think. I thought I wrote a blog somewhere about it.
I'm hoping it will be not similar in terms of content, but when I did the user experience designer certification, I found huge value in that one, for things that I just didn't really know about in terms of accessibility on websites. So I think doing things like the strategy designer, they really help continue to build out my perspective on things, so that I'm not just building things that are functional, but I'm also building things that have a good user experience. Everything goes hand in hand.
Yeah, and I think the strategy designer one is good as well for helping people think about how it all fits together. Like, no, I don't think there's any company anymore that are just buying Sales Cloud or are just buying Service Cloud. Yeah, there's very few companies that are just doing a single cloud thing, or even if they are, they're integrating it with 3 or 4 other systems anyway. And so I think there's a big thing to think about on that strategy level of okay, we might just be doing this part, but it's in this, and how do these all fit together, and what's the timeline, and where does it all come through? That isn't technical, but is just that sort of what makes sense as part of a discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's very cool. So that's interesting to know. I look forward to seeing that pop up on LinkedIn. My one I'm trying to do is the data cloud one. I saw when we had Inez on the other week. Yeah, Inez was on the other week and was talking about her Udemy course, and I thought I need to try and do one this year. So data cloud is a hot topic, and one that I feel to me at the moment, data cloud is like a vaporware thing where I'm just like, and I know it's not vaporware. Salesforce, don't tell me off. I'm not sure I understand it. Like I know what it is meant to be, but I just don't understand how it works and what it does. And I don't understand Commerce Cloud, but I understand fundamentally what e-commerce is. I'm not sat there going like, a web store. Never thought of this before. But and I've worked with data lakes and data, marts and data warehouses and all these things before, and CDPs and all that. And it doesn't seem to be any one of those things. And so I'm just kind of intrigued to see what it actually is and how it works. It's a bit like Einstein. I feel like the Einstein terminology is so bandied around that it kind of has lost. I've kind of lost the understanding of what Einstein is. And it's interesting. I had a customer the other week who was talking to me about Einstein and was just like, well, what I'll do is I'll just take all this data and I'll give it to Einstein and it will give me these answers, won't it? And I was like, no, that's not how, but that was kind of their view of what it should be doing. And it's expectation management.
It's a little bit more complex than that. That one of the things that we've been doing at Salesforce Ben, myself and my colleague Andrew have been doing a lot of the writing around Einstein Studio One, so Copilot, prompt builder, model builder that goes into it, and really trying to demystify that and explain again in layperson's terms. What are these things? And what's the difference? What's the difference between the Copilot and the prompt builder? All of that. That's why I was struggling last year, because there was words being thrown around and no one actually going, but what does it actually mean? And how do the pieces slot together? Do I need all 3 bits? Do they all come together? Do they not? What Einstein products do you have to pay for? What's free? Because like everything's Einstein. Einstein is just anything with AI capability, as far as I can tell. But if you do figure out what the data cloud is and can put it in layperson's terms, if you could share that, I think we'd appreciate it.
I'll let you know if I get there. I think that's that piece you mentioned there about the payment of it, and you hit on this earlier on about, like, when you were saying about being jaded because you're not going to get to use things yourself. That's one of the hardest things at the moment is Salesforce's license model and setup and what's in and what's out. When I was launching groundwork apps, like I have a rule that, like, I need to be able to explain the payment model for it in 3 lines. Like if it's more complex, like the product we have out at the moment, the SMS and Viber messaging product, it's like a fee per org per month. That's it. I don't care how many users. There's just so much complexity around, like, how things are priced and what's included and how much you get. And, like, if we're buying bots, how many conversations? What's a conversation? Is it just, can I turn the bot on and off at certain times? All these things. It's just, there's so much complexity and nuance around it that makes it so very hard for anyone to unpick. Completely get it.
I think Salesforce are unpicking it as well. I think we're kind of all in it together to some degree. This whole concept of AI and GPTs and then being built into CRMs or connected to CRMs is relatively new. And Salesforce, I think that I was in part of a conversation with some Salesforce execs, and some people had voiced their frustration about the AI prominence that was, it all seems to be about Einstein this and Einstein that. And someone made a really good point. They said, but what else can we do? Because if we don't do this, if we don't get on board with AI and GPTs and figure out how to make this work with Salesforce, then we get left behind, because it's not going away. And one of our competitors, or like a brand new competitor, will come out of the woodworks and all singing, all dancing. And Salesforce has to be able to compete in their industry, so they have to do this. But they're still kind of on this learning journey with us of, like, for example, Einstein Studio One, people didn't have access to orgs for ages, and I think even now it was like a 7-day trial, and it might be a little bit longer now.
Yeah.
But if you're doing lots of these Einstein prompts and call outs, you're using lots of stuff which costs them money as well.
I think that's the whole. I am one of these people that is. So I'm doing a talk at London's Calling about AI and what's useful, what's not useful. Yeah, so we'll probably have very good overlapping slides. We should actually chat about that. Make sure we're not starting a flame war between us. But I think that I think one of the fundamental, there's a video I in fact watched earlier, which is from the Fireship YouTube channel. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a fantastic YouTube channel that does some brilliant kind of short explainer videos, and they were talking about LLMs and GPTs and I think that I think we're very, very soon going to hit this the sort of hype curve kind of trough of disillusionment with them, because as wonderful as they all are, they're only as good as, like, the data. I mean, we've all seen the funny pictures of the Google search results of putting glue in your pizza and things like that. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, but I was been thinking about this a lot recently. It's your AI is only as good as the data it has access to. So I think part of my big frustration last year around this is, for me, as an admin by trade, is that we've never resolved some of the core issues that we have around data quality, the impact data quality has on user adoption. And I'm like, those are 2 really important things. And so to add AI into the mix, it frustrates me, because we still haven't fixed our data, and that's a conversation for as long as I've been in Salesforce, and I know will date me. And now we're adding AI in, and AI is smart, but it's going to come up with things based on your data, and it's going to be wrong. Something else I'm frustrated about.
I also don't think a lot of people have enough data. and this is a fundamental kind of argument I have with people, where I think that I use ChatGPT and Copilot and all these things a lot, and I've used a lot of the different tools and think they're wonderful, but they're only there to augment things. But to sit there and say, I've got enough data in my environment to train this model effectively on what it is, because all of these models have been trained on the internet. And so, your Salesforce data with your 10,000, even if you've got 10,000 leads or 1 million leads in there, that's still a drop in the proverbial ocean.
Yes.
So I think it's going to be an interesting time to see what happens with it. And I also think that it reminds me a little bit of, do you remember Einstein voice?
Do I? I do.
Yeah. So I remember for a few years, the biggest thing that was going to be in Salesforce was voice.
2019, I think they announced it at Dreamforce.
Didn't they? Do I also remember them coming up with an Alexa style thing, or have I just dreamt that?
No, I think that was it. Like, I think that's the whole kind of. That's what it was. It was Alexa, but it was Einstein.
Yeah, and I think they even had like an Einstein voice. But I think there was like a thing where they even had like a little actual physical item you could buy.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a little pod thing. But and like no one uses that anymore. And it's not that voice isn't useful, and it's not that voice isn't important. It's just that it's not going to be. People are still using laptops, and as long as you're using a laptop, I think that a mouse with a clicker with a pointer is going to be your default option. I think a lot of these tools are fantastic, but if they can become more ubiquitous, can really allow different people to engage with things, and can allow you to surface things in a different way. I've actually found a picture of the little Einstein voice guy.
Because I don't think it ever came out of. I can't even remember how far it got. If it went, I think it went to beta. I don't think it ever became GA.
No, and that's the sort of thing where I actually remember being on a conversation with someone at Salesforce about it. I think, or having a chat with someone when it came out, and that was it. When it came out, I was chatting to someone who was saying to me it was really exciting. I was like, great. So how does that deal with sharing rules when you're in an open office space? And they're like, what? I was like, well, you said that you can't see this record or you can't see these fields. So what about that data being shouted out? Oh, and that's it. It's the same. So I'm one of these people that is. I think Einstein and the Prompt Studio is going to be big for a while, but I'm then expecting it to not die, but be sort of like removed in terms of usefulness, because I think I just don't think there's going to be enough. I struggle to see there being enough use cases for enough people that require truly generative AI capabilities, when what a lot of people want is actually data analysis and data mining.
Yeah.
Like I said, that customer who wanted to give it to Einstein and it's more like the Einstein, Einstein prediction, but not prediction builder.
Yes. Yeah, I think
Einstein Analytics Plus, I think it was called. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If anyone from Salesforce is listening here, you have two people who have worked collectively in the industry now for about 25 years, struggling to remember product names. Please simplify them. But
don't keep changing them, because that's also really confusing.
Once we just want one set of product names once, and that's it. No, so that's been brilliant. So we should probably wrap up, because we're nearly at 2 hours here for everyone listening. But this has been super, and I've really enjoyed it. So, and we've covered an awful lot of things, from sort of tips about speaking, tips about writing content, tips about dealing with anxiety in different social situations, tips about joining groups, and just many things. But one of the things I ask people is to, if you had one tip for listeners or viewers of the podcast on YouTube, what would that tip be? And you're not limited strictly to one, because most of our guests are the sort of interesting people that will have a ton of ideas and set up. So, but if you had one or two tips, what would they be?
So Paul did give me a pep talk before we started filming to say, don't give too many tips. And that's fine, because actually I only have two. I was going to have one, but actually I would like to add in a second one just off the back of what we've just been talking about.
This is slippery. This is why I give people a pep talk, because otherwise it'd be another half hour here with Christine's tips. No, I'm joking. Sorry, Christine. Please go ahead with your 2 tips.
No, so 2 tips, and one of them is around AI. So my first tip would be, please don't put any company information, any intellectual property, this includes things like code, into a public-facing GPT. This is a real problem at the moment, and I don't think people are aware that when you feed this into the machine, that it's ingesting you shouldn't put personal data in, personally identifiable data, no company information. Just don't do it. If it's private, if it's not to be shared, it must not go into something like ChatGPT. So if there's just one thing you don't do whilst we're all going through this AI craze, it's let's not put like all of your contacts into ChatGPT or anything like that, or any of your code that you have in your Salesforce org. That is not for public consumption. And then the other tip, and the tip I was actually going to give, is that if you want to do something, you can. So not to be afraid, not to feel like an imposter, not to feel overwhelmed. There are so many people out here with different skill sets, different capabilities, different personalities. And one thing I've noticed is that if people want to do something, they can do it. You can go away and you can learn things. So never to feel like you can't be a Salesforce admin, or you couldn't go from being an admin and then learn code and become a developer, or you can't climb the architect pyramid, or you can't do a speaking session in front of other people. You absolutely can. And as with most things in life, it all just takes practice.
That's perfect. Those are 2 wonderful, wonderful tips. So thank you so much, Christine. This has been a wonderful conversation, as is shown by the fact that we're now at 1 hour and 56 minutes. So thank you very much for your time as well. I've learned a ton. I've really enjoyed having this chat, and I look forward to hopefully bumping into you at one of the many parties and events over the next couple of weeks. So thank you so much again for coming along. Thank you to everyone who's listened and watched through this. I hope you've at least taken, had a pause halfway through, because this is, 2 hours is a long time, but this has been wonderful. And remember to like and subscribe. If you've enjoyed it, please remember to share with someone. That's the only way this channel grows. That's my awkward requests done. As I said, I hate doing them, but thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.